Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Bernard Lamarche. I'm the curator of contemporary art at the Musée National des Beaux-Arts du Québec. I've been working for that museum for the last 13 years now. And I was invited by Soad and the McBride Gallery to present and launch the book 19 Nocturnes with Jim, that I'm pretty sure that every one of you knows pretty well. So this is Jim Holyoak. As you all know, his practice consists of drawing, ink painting, and writing, making artist books, and large-scale drawing installation. He has an MFA from Concordia University in Montreal, and I just learned that this morning, even though I'm pretty sure that you already told me that, but he studied as an apprentice with master ink painter 𝗕cie𝗰𝘁𝘂𝗿 in Guangzhou, China. I said Japan, sorry, China. And you might know his collaborative work with Matchain, with whom he made like huge installations at the Musée d'Art Contemporain de Montréal for one of the many examples in the world, because he's been traveling a lot. So today we're here to launch the book of 19 Nocturnes that's over there, that you will be able to invited to look at. And I prepared a few questions for Jim. He knows all the questions already. We prepared that. And I wrote something about the book as an introduction. I'm going to read it in French first and then in English to make sure that everybody gets... So in French. Selon moi, le livre des 19 Nocturnes de Jim Holyoak est déjà une œuvre d'art marquante de l'art visuel qui s'inscrit dans une réflexion profonde sur la nature de l'expérience humaine, de la perception et de l'introspection. Dans une série de 19 œuvres nocturnes, Jim questionne les frontières entre l'obscurité et la lumière, la réalité et le rêve, tout en explorant des nuances de l'imaginaire et du subconscient. Cette série d'œuvres, souvent caractérisée par ses dessins et ses gravures, propose une immersion dans des univers mystérieux et envoûtants où les formes humaines, animales et végétales se transforment, se mélangent et évoluent dans un espace infini, souvent sombre. La portée du livre ne se limite pas à une simple contemplation esthétique. Il invite également à quiconque à réfléchir à la manière dont nous connectons aux mondes invisibles et intangibles qui nous entourent. Les motifs récurrents de l'ombre, du rêve et du paysage intérieur créent un dialogue avec l'inconscient, cherchant à toucher les dimensions émotionnelles et spirituelles. Les compositions complexes de Jim semblent capturer l'imprévisibilité de la nuit, l'inconnu, l'instabilité même de la perception humaine. In English now. According to me, Jim's book, Book of 19 Nocturnes, is already a landmark work of visual art, part of a profound reflection of the nature of human experience, perception, and introspection. In a series of 19 nocturnal works, Jim questions the boundaries between darkness and light, reality and dream, while exploring the nuances of the imaginary and the subconscious. This series of works, often characterized by its drawings and engravings, offers an immersion into mysterious and bewitching universes where human, animal, and plant forms transmute, blend, and evolve in an indefinite, often nocturnal space. The scope of the Book of 19 Nocturnes is not limited to simple aesthetic contemplation. It also invites the viewer to reflect on how we connect with the invisible, intangible, worlds around us. Recurring motifs of shadow, dream, and inner landscape create a dialogue with the unconscious, seeking to touch emotional and spiritual dimensions. Jim's complex compositions seem to capture the unpredictability of the night, the unknown, the very instability of human perception. This is what the book is about. What you have to know is that the first version of what we now have as a book was a huge installation, and we'll talk about the transformation of that installation that was shown in 𝗕cie𝗰𝘁𝘂𝗿 a year and a half ago, 2 years ago?
More, about 2017.
Already?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Already?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Yeah.
8 years ago?
Mm.
It's funny because I thought it was like yesterday. So that installation that we used to walk through in order to look at all the drawings, and there's a huge pile of them. Mm-hmm. is now the book that we are talking about this morning. So I guess that the first question should be, because you told me that this week that it's like 25 years in the making.
Yeah.
So maybe we could start with that.
Sure. So it's a tremendous personal landmark for me. This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The longer it took, the longer it had to take. It was like collaborating with different versions of myself. It was written over the course of, I suppose, the first part of my adulthood. I conceived of the book when I was 21 years old, and it was just a thought experiment. If we all share this outer world together, but we all carry an inner world that is private, maybe secret, how do we share it? What would mine be like? And at the time, and actually ever since, I've been keeping a dream diary. And for the longest time, when I would be dreaming and I would look at the sky, I would see little white stars. And so I figured my inner world was at nighttime. And so I thought, what would that be like if I wasn't quite me, but like an inner version of me in an inner world of my own, and to try to describe that place. And I probably could have just sat down and written it in a couple hours, but instead it took me 25 years, and who I was changed. And so I'd have to rewrite it. And it was all built out of little fragments in my notebooks like these, and then woven together with drawings in my backpack while I spent the first part of my adulthood traveling widely, often living out of a backpack. I don't want to preempt your next question about surrealism, but if that frames how it was begun.
Yeah, okay. Because yes, at the beginning of the book, there's two excerpts. One is from André Breton, and it comes from Nadia. And the other one is Catherine Peacock. She used to be a musician who died
2016.
2016. I was about to say 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I mixed up with my dates. Yeah. So the first, in the book, we see that quote from André Breton. It's taken from Nadia. In French, it's « Il se peut que ma vie ne soit qu'une image de ce genre et que je sois condamné à revenir sur mes pas tout en croyant que j'explore, à essayer de connaître ce que je devrais fort bien reconnaître, à apprendre une faible partie de ce que j'ai oublié. » In English, you quote it like that. Perhaps my life is nothing but an image of this kind. Perhaps I'm doomed to retrace my steps under the illusion that I am exploring, doomed to try and learn what I should simply recognize, learning a mere fraction of what I have forgotten. So that brings us back to surrealism. So I think that it's always been a part of your work, and even more in that book.
Yes. So I first read it in a book of Adrienne Rich, the American poet, that was on my mom's bookshelf when I was a teenager. And I read that quote and was deeply affected by it and could never quite unpack it. It was always mysterious, but struck me as true. I remember I studied at the University of Victoria creative writing before I shifted into visual art. And I had a professor who told me that, well, I guess we write because we remember. Us writers have such good memories, we need to write it all down. And I didn't relate to what she said. And I realized later that that wasn't true for me. I write because I can't remember. I write because I forget. I write because my way of thinking and remembering is nonlinear. And memory works that way. You hear a song, you smell something, and it takes you back to your grandma's house or something when you're a kid. And that's how my mind works. So I need these in order to organize my thoughts, my sketchbooks, my diaries, and that all becomes raw material. So Breton's quote is actually a thought experiment. It's a what if question. Like, what if I've lived all this before, but just simply can't remember it? Which is similar to the Buddhist idea of reincarnation, that we leave these parts of an old life behind, but a spirit carries on. I'm a deeply agnostic person, generally speaking, but believe in the possibility enough to genuinely ask myself that question. What if I've seen some of this before? What if I've known some of you from other times and simply can't remember? And later I read Nadia, and I became super interested in surrealism, and I realized that Breton's book was about a projected female other double. And in a sense, perhaps it would be to reveal too much that the main character of my book, whose name is Book, is kind of like my shadow female double, who I could project myself into and who also could be different than me.
Yeah. Speaking of reincarnation, this project has many lives. The book, the audiobook, the installation. I was wondering how, as an artist, you can think about those different like medias and forms and differently from one life to another.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I didn't learn to read and write multi-syllable words until I was 11, although my ability to understand writing and stories and speech was way beyond my age ever since I was a kid. So the thought of, well, I mean, drawing and writing as a verb and as a noun, as an action, as a event, as a performance, and also as an object is something that you could take with you. The intimacy of a book where I can read Leo Tolstoy or listen to an audiobook of him and feel like I have a friend who's like a traveling companion while I'm drawing. I'm always listening to either music or audiobooks while I'm working. And as a kid, reading the Turn the Page When You Hear the Chime books, where there's an integration of drawing and writing, and learning to read from comic books, which was always about the marriage or synthesis of text and image, and the third meaning that happens when they come together. That's how I was always thinking in the first place. So it was instinctive to try to create an audiobook as well as a visual book. To talk of the installation, so at 𝗕cie, the Artist Friends Center here in Montreal, I had the 19 chapters separate into 19 separate accordion books. They actually could be pulled out like long scrolls, each one of them. And because it's so big, actually I can barely lift it, the whole book together. That photo Bernard showed is actually, it got twice as big once it was complete. So it's enormous. But we often go to a museum and are told, don't touch the artwork. But every artist who works with material needs to touch the artwork in order to make the work. And I wanted people to have that tactile as well as visual experience that we have. We're also, as manual artists, tactile artists too. And there's something about touching the book, especially the one that the artist actually made. I mean, I touch it with my bare hands in order to turn the pages, and have embraced the stains and the wrinkles and the scars and the repair that occur as not damage, but process of having had a life, much like our skin gathers wrinkles and tears and stains from being alive long enough. So it has a lifespan, and I wanted people to feel that. Yeah. There's also a thing about walking and wandering. We wander through the pages of suspended disbelief as we read a story. We wander through our minds as we come up with the idea of a story. We wander with our feet when we travel, and also whenever the artwork becomes bigger than my own body, I relate to it physically, as like being in the presence of another entity, another being. And when it's smaller than me, I see it like a window into another world. And in this sense, I wanted to have the doubled immersion. So we have to wander with our eyes, our hands, and our feet, and our mind, quadrupled immersion, in order to experience it.
Yeah. I know that you've been part of the Quebec Biennale, the Manif d'Art, but the last edition of the Quebec Biennale was about sleep. François Morelli was part of it. The power of sleep. I was wondering if, well, I know that your work could have fit in that edition, and I wanted you to talk maybe about the gap between some long hours of insomnia that I think you experience, and that the fact that those hours might have driven you to draw from many hours. So it's the importance of the infinite openness of the dream world in the work. Had both insomnia and sleep had a role to play in the book?
So I normally sleep, well, I don't know what normal is anymore, but I don't usually suffer from insomnia unless I'm nervous. Like last night, I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning, having nightmares because I was going to talk with you all today. But to return to that in a moment, Victor Hugo said that the dream is the aquarium of night. And 𝗕ciecie𝗸𝘁, the famous American sci-fi fantasy novelist, said that we like to think we live in daylight, but half the world is always dark. And fantasy, like poetry, speaks the language of night. And although I am not necessarily an insomniac, I can't help it. Ever since, whenever I'm allowed to be, I become a night owl. I am an hibou de nuit, and perhaps a papillon de nuit. But I've learned that actually moths are a subspecies of, or butterflies are a subspecies of moth. There's many times more species of moths than butterflies. So it'd be more accurate to call them moths du jour, would be the butterflies. As soon as I finished high school and didn't have to wake up early in the morning, I became nocturnal. I would go to sleep when the sun set and woke up when the sun would, or I would go to sleep when the sun rose and wake up. Well, I would spend the whole night walking around at night and reading books. And I remember there's so many parts to this, transcending fear of the dark, at least a rational fear of the dark, walking through fields at nights when it was too dark to see the sky from the ground and having to learn to navigate by touch. I had a border collie, a black and white dog named Sue. And I would take her for walks in the middle of the night. I'd see the opening to the forest in my hometown. I'd be so scared. I'd see werewolves and axe murderers. And I would force myself to smile, and we'd go in, and I'd keep an eye on her white spot on her back. And we would walk through the forest, and I'd look at the stars through the ceiling of trees. And then we'd arrive at the field of tall grass on the other side, and we were both filled with joy. I remember my dog just rolling around happily on the ground when we came through. I felt exactly the same way. So I think that I can think clearly at night. I feel so peaceful and free when everybody else is asleep. And I've been so interested in, it's kind of like fishing when you throw a fishing line. I don't fish anymore, but when you feel something on the line and you're not sure what it is, this is what walking around in the dark is too. You find things that are hidden, and it's a mysterious world. But I no longer found it scary. I got over fear of the dark.
Yeah, it's funny because you just mentioned the moth and the papillon de nuit. I have an irrational fear of papillon de nuit. Like if they're maybe not here, but in any house, if there's one, I have to leave. Or the papillon has to leave. So you just mentioned it, I got goosebumps just by hearing papillon de nuit. Said, oh yeah.
I'm an expert catcher.
Already?
Yeah.
So you're gonna save me?
Yeah. My current solo show is called Moth House. It's all about insects. Yeah.
Cool. Let's go back to Catherine Peacock. She used to be a musician in Montreal, a prominent local scene musician, and you quote her at the beginning of the book. And I was wondering, you almost mentioned it. We'll know that the nocturne is a musical form, first of all, through Chopin or John Field, and I was wondering, what is the part of music in all of this, if there's any part that music plays?
Okay, so to begin with, I feel it's important to thank Catherine right now. She was my friend for 12 years. It's hard for me to speak of her because, she died at age 33, died of suicide and a really mental health crisis. And it was a huge blow to me and the music community that she was part of, particularly my brother, who was her primary bandmate. They recorded many albums together. But I knew Catherine ever since I moved to Montreal. She was from Ottawa. Yeah. A super sensitive, beautiful person, multi-instrumentalist, singer-songwriter. She, in the end of her life, lived at the Pines recording studio out here in Griffintown. And she would every weekend for a while come. I was having so much trouble editing my book, and she was very literary. She wrote an operatic play that was performed in downtown or Griffintown. Anyway, she would help me edit my book every weekend, and there was an influence where she wrote a song about my book, and I changed my book to echo her song. So in the end of the audiobook version, her song is the last thing, a song called Here and There the Sun. And she's also the voice of one of the characters in the story. But she also helped me to actually finish the book. And it was just an act of love on her part. She wasn't paid to do it. She just came over and drink coffee with me, and we would work on editing the story. But then to come back to music, especially the idea of nocturnes and musical ambiance. This is where we talk about Chopin? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, a nocturne is normally thought of as music that is either meant to evoke the sensation of night or the ambiance of night, or it's meant to be played at night or performed at night or experienced at night. So I think of lullabies as a type of nocturne because it's meant to help one fall asleep. And I think of bedtime stories as a type of nocturne for kids, maybe, that helps someone go to sleep. And if we were to create parallels to the musical nocturne, of course, to many painterly nocturnes,
yep.
And literary nocturnes, they're all doing this too. So I definitely think of this book as a setting and ambiance-driven book. It's not driven by a linear, conventional Western story arc. It's much more surrealistic dream logic, which I actually think is more accurate to real life than the manufacture of at the beginning and then happily ever after. I think that things happen and then other things happen and that we are changed. And that just keeps on going from the first thought that we have, weaving all through life to the last, I suppose. And that ambiance of music, I'm probably a frustrated musician. I wish that I started playing guitar when I was younger. I was in an instrumental punk band in Victoria with my friend Matt Shane and others. And before moving to Montreal, we were really obsessed with Godspeed You Black Emperor and Set Fire to Flames and some of the Constellation bands, many of which were minimally lyrical. Often they had field recordings, interviews that were woven through it. So this is how we thought of Montreal before coming here. And once we were here, we would listen to it while working on art projects. I've always shared studio spaces with musicians. So as I'm trying to think through a drawing or some writing, I'd hear the musicians rehearsing, trying to think through, and I always felt that kinship with musicians. And I love music. I've toured with punk bands around North America a number of times and have blasted my ears out. Would go to the Suoni Popolo festivals and close my eyes and draw with both hands, thinking of it as like an observational, almost figure drawing exercise, except I would hold 4 pencils or more like chopsticks, and like musicians, draw two-handed the same way musicians would perform their instruments, trying to describe what I heard and how that felt. And it would change the way I would perceive. You know how music can remind you of a time when you heard that song before, and all of a sudden you're able to access things you couldn't before, and how it can change your sense of time. Like I think I've become more obsessed with soothing, quiet, gentle, actually somber music as I've aged because it helps my nerves. It helps me to relax and to calm down and concentrate by slowing the pace down. My brother Neil, who's a musician, he's way more chill than I am. And I love listening to him play music because it calms me down.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to show you an image. Well, you saw the image. I want to show you the image. Because we talked about the fact that the book is under André Breton and Catherine Peacock's spell. We talked about music as an inspiration, and I wanted to talk maybe about some different influences or inspiration that we could have. And I stumbled on that painting from James Whistler. It's in the Detroit Institute of Arts collection. So it is called, the title of the painting is Nocturne in Black and Gold, The Falling Rocket, 1875. So the painting is known to be one example of the art for art's sake movement, a concept formulated by 𝗕tože 𝗂𝘀𝘀 and Jean-Paul. Wow, sorry for that, Jean-Paul Riopelle. I'm working on Jean-Paul Riopelle, as you all know, and Charles Baudelaire. So the painting is fundamentally composed of bleak tones, restricted in its use of color, more or less like the book. And I know that Jean-Sian, the art historian Jean-Sian Bélanger, has proposed names like Lewis Carroll, Tolkien, Guillermo del Toro as possible influences in your work in the last 25 years and more. Could you talk a little bit more about those influences, and talk maybe about the fact that Whistler might be one of those?
Okay, so I'll confess that I didn't learn about Whistler until later, but then I have become quite interested in any kind of nocturne, so I totally looked at Whistler also. But the lineage is actually, well, it's different. I went to China when I was 22 years old. And I was wandering in the streets of Yangzhou in Guangxi province, looking at different art galleries. That's an incredible setting. I looked at lots of Chinese landscape paintings and always thought they were completely imaginary until I went there. And I'd see these vertical karst black mountains hovering in like a lake of fog. And it was like a Chinese fairy tale to be there. And I couldn't believe my eyes. And I wandered all these galleries looking at all these paintings, and I started seeing a recurrent artist, a man named Sunling Xiang, who always painted nocturnes, Chinese nocturnes. And they were not like a Zen painting that had one big line and just one gesture and one breath. These ones would take hours and days, maybe weeks even, of layering, watching the ink dry, layering, watching the ink dry to make these very dim, low contrast, dark on dark on dark paintings. Except for occasionally when he made snowscapes, which were like an inverse of the nightscapes. Perhaps my interest in snow is related to my interest in tone. When people ask me why I don't use color, I always feel like I get defensive, like I should be like, well, why don't you use grayscale or something? But that's probably an unfair reply. I think I just didn't know the answer. But I think it actually relates back to that sense of ambiance and destimulating by desaturating. I'm attracted to color and I like color, but I find that the grayscale is the more soothing on my mind to look at. And I enjoy the exercise of thinking in negative and positive space, which Chinese painting requires, because it's not okay to use white paint. If you want a white area, if you want a trail of the moon's reflection in the water, you have to work into the positive space to create that negative space. And to be able to think in those two ways at the same time is something I love trying to do. It's a long story, but a bilingual woman introduced me to Sunling Xiang, who gave me a lesson that she translated, and 7 years later I went back and studied with him for 9 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 months, and I came back a different kind of artist. And then learned about his influences, which included 𝗕ciecie𝗸𝘁, who was another Chinese nocturne painter who actually studied in Europe and learned chiaroscuro, using light and shadow to create space and stacked layers. And I had learned a European tradition inadvertently through a Chinese teacher. I don't want to go on too long, but then later spent about a year in Norway. I became completely obsessed with the illustrator Theodore Kittelsen, who would wander around at the time 𝗕ciecie𝗸𝘁. I love the French idea, like this moment where you can't tell the dog from the wolf, when you look at your friend and can't quite tell his expression, is he smiling or frowning? That kind of natural hallucination that occurs. He would do this looking for trolls, which only come out at night and are fossilized by daylight. So he would make he's Norway's most famous troll illustrator, because he illustrated the Norwegian fairy tales, which is like the Brothers Grimm of Norway. And so I became quite obsessed with him. All these hybrid mountain, haystack, tree, anthropomorphic bodily beings. There's a lot more I could go into. But
I know that.
Yeah.
I know that. Time is running by. So you said the word hallucination. There's a wonderful book by Jean-François Chevrier that has not been translated yet in English. It should. Surprisingly. It's called L'hallucination artistique de William Blake à 𝗕ciecie𝗸𝘁𝘁. it covers a vast field of experience between terror and ecstasy and goes through many art movements like Romanticism, Symbolism, Expressionism, Surrealism, and the psychedelia of the 60s. I bring you to definition. According to the current psychiatric definition, an hallucination is a perception without an object. A mental creation which has the appearance of and authority of a perception, but does not exist. It was brought up by Gustave Flaubert in the 1900s, 1866 to be precise, responding to an inquiry from his friend 𝗕cie𝗰𝘁𝘂𝗀 concerning the sources of the literary imagination. I don't see you as a madman, I don't see you as a mystic, but I was wondering if hallucination is part of your artistic process.
It is. And I think that we all hallucinate. Ursula Le Guin said that when you read a book or write one, you are bonkers. You're completely crazy. You're believing in impossible things and dragons and vampires and who knows what, while you're lost in the suspended disbelief of the story. And I read a book called Why We Sleep, and another one called Dreaming is Delirium, and another one called The End of Night, which were all about different ideas about dream psychology. And, well, The End of Night is about light pollution and other things also. It talked about the Mount Megantic Dark Sky Preserve, which I really want to go to. And, okay, so there was a while that I was writing this book with or drawing it or writing it with almost all of my daytime hours, and the rest of my time I was asleep. And I realized that most of my time I was not actually here in this world. I was in one or the other of my own inner worlds. And then, I learned about William Blake really early on because he was an amazing example of almost like like a proto-zine creator, somebody who would bring writing and drawing together. And my parents knew about him and told me about him, and I think I almost related to him intuitively as like another neurodivergent person before I had the word for that. And then I remember reading a book by him at my dad's house when I was 21 years old, and he was talking about encountering angels and the conversations he would have with them. And I realized that he was different than me, that he was actually more crazy than I was. But I've loved him ever since. When I've been to England, I've gone to the Tate Britain into their special collections to look at the paper drawn version, his actual drawings with no glass, and just copy them. And there's something about looking at somebody else's drawing or handwriting and observing it and drawing it again that makes you get close to them. And I felt like he was there because I was drawing his drawing directly. So there's a lot of his work that's hugely inspiring to me and his way of thinking. I also learned a lot about him from Allen Ginsberg, who was one of the first beatnik poet. He was the most important beatnik artist to me, yeah. And then I guess I wanted to just mention travel and the kind of experience of open-mindedness and hallucination that evokes. Every time I land in Montreal, I've been away for a while, I get almost a contact high, this huge thrill of energy to be back here in a place that feels like my adoptive home. And for 24 hours, I feel like I'm hallucinating, depending where I've come from. But I've just come from the mountains and forests of eastern BC, and I love both places, and they're so different. I can't believe this planet has so many different places. It feels interplanetary to go to place, and that is a hallucinogenic experience that is mind expanding. And I have written this while riding on boats, on ferries, trains, subways, jets, in these liminal spaces in between all of these different places. The last chapter of the book, I partly wrote in a rowboat on mushrooms. I hadn't confessed that to anybody yet, but now it's on film. Yeah.
I'm going to rephrase the last question. We're going to open the discussion to the public, so maybe you could think about questions that you wanted to ask Jim. I was really, really thrilled when Soad invited me for this talk because in the past I curated a show about ghost photography, about pareidolia, the fact that we can see like shapes in clouds. So I mean, I think it's natural, and we've worked together in the past. So, and I'm going to rephrase that question because I started to say I'm going to read it, but rephrase it while I read it. Because I was asking, I don't know whether this question should be placed on the level of politics or poetry, but I do know that it's both. So, so given the current context, which is troubled for the former, politics, and precarious for the latter, poetry, I wonder if 19 Nocturnes doesn't open up the crucial problem, again, on both levels, of the pervasive place of the imaginary at the very heart of existence. The imaginary, one of the guiding principles of Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy, for example. In his philosophy, the imaginary plays an important role in how the individual constitutes and defines himself. The imaginary allows us to extricate ourselves from immediate situations and project possibilities, future projects, or alternative worlds. We always talk about the multiverse these days in the Marvel and DC comic books, and it is therefore intimately linked to freedom. We can imagine other lives, other choices, and this shapes the way we act in the world. I believe that imagination enables us to pose alternatives to our current situation and to rethink the limits of our own existences. And the question is simple. Would you follow me on this?
Absolutely, I would. And this is a question that I have thought a bunch about because I feel it's so important, and I haven't known quite how to answer in a way that would be insightful or meaningful or careful enough. But I did not write this book, at least consciously, in response to things like totalitarianism and things that I worry about at this exact moment, especially. I get that, yeah. But I do think it implicitly challenges ideas of singularity. I think it is about challenging a fundamentalist idea that there's one right way or one true belief. And it's about so I don't believe in a totalizing way of perceiving or in believing. The book is about doubt and uncertainty, about not knowing the answers, and about being able to permit and embrace the exploration of questions. All throughout the book, in the kind of Lewis Carroll sense, there's questions that are answered in unsatisfying ways that in the end, we just don't totally know the answer. So it's deeply agnostic in a sense. Let's see. I think that in a way that it's quite true is that it's a challenge to anthropocentric views of reality, views that center any individual human, but humanity in general. It challenges the belief that we are the center of the universe, or have some kind of supremacy over the other earthlings, or maybe even that the Earth isn't the center of the universe. But it is a challenge to myself to look at what am I? What is it to be human? And it is a type of animal, and to continually try to remember that I'm a creature that actually I evolved from other creatures. These hands that we now use to draw and write books and do all the things that humans do actually evolved for climbing trees, which children so instinctively do. It's still a part of us. And it's the same way that our feet are meant for walking and our mouths are made for speaking and our brains think like this sometimes. So that extreme plurality of all the individual conscious entities in the world, to see myself as an earthling, to try to remember that I'm having an animal encounter with you all right now, that we're all creatures. That I think is something that is at the heart of it. Yeah. I suppose that it's important to say that I'm a dual citizen. I'm American Canadian. I've been extremely disturbed like every day for a long while now. But one of the things that's frightened me is the chilling effect of freedom of thought and speech and conversation, and that ideas that can't be said, can't be drawn, can't be depicted, also cannot be thought. And then if you can't think a thing, you can't believe in it. If you can't believe in it, you can't make it happen. You can't change things. So it's defending people's ability to create, to think, and actually to celebrate the variety of the ways that we do so. Yeah. I don't know how to express how important it is for how we are able to confront our changing world. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks,
You've
Bernard.
seen the book. It's quite thick. It's heavy, 7 pounds.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah, and I hope we just gave you another way to look at the book and how thick it is, mainly on the symbolic realm. So if you have any questions, we would take them now because it's already almost 11. Time goes really, really fast. And you can look at the books, I think, yeah. And you can buy copies of the book if you want to, because today is the official launch of the Book of 19 Nocturnes. So thank you for being here with us this morning. And your turn now, if you have questions.
Est-ce que c'est seulement un livre? On voit différents couverts, c'est toujours le même livre?
C'est le même livre, il y a 26 exemplaires, mais 26 seulement, les lettres de A à Z. Puis, il y a 26 couvertures différentes, par contre, qui sont faites à la main par Jim.
Comme ça, c'est une édition limitée.
Oui, très limitée.
Un de un?
Un de un à chaque boîtier, un de un. Et le livre, c'est à chaque fois un de A, B, C, D de Z, de 26. Je veux dire comme ça.
You're saying there is an audio component. Is that for the digital version of this book? There is like the audio as well? Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So tomorrow the audio and ebook versions also launch. So the audiobook is already actually available on Audible, owned by Amazon, and on Kindle, or Kobo, pardon me, which is a Canadian company. So I just downloaded the Kobo version because I'm trying to stop using any Amazon stuff. Yep. So it's available on both. And the ebook version, and that's $19, $1 per chapter, so more affordable. And then, and that's an audio drama, close to a radio drama, where I'm the main narrator. My friend Sarah Pupo is the voice of the main character. And there's about 20 other actually artisan musicians who had lived in Montreal and who I wrangled into being the voices of the characters. And it's woven together with soundscapes and musical intros and outros by 𝗕ciecie𝗸𝘁, who did all the sound editing over 9 years to assemble the thing. So the audiobook is a major project too. And the ebook is on Kindle, and I'll have it on Kobo within a month. I have to break it down into 19 chapters for file size purposes, so give me a little more time, but then that will be available too. And you can get it on Kindle as of tomorrow. Yeah. Thank you, Bernard.
My pleasure. That was fun.
It was fun, and thank you everybody for hanging out and listening to us think. And it's like feels like my birthday or something. Yeah. Yeah.